Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. I'm Austin Tichenor from the Reduced Shakespeare Company.
And I'm Gary Andrews, otherwise known as Gary Scribbler from the internet all over the place.
And despite popular demand, we are back with another episode of Drawing on Shakespeare. And we have a man today who is, I'm just going to introduce him because it would take too long to list everything he does, but they all draw on Shakespeare. Ladies and germs, Mr. Ben Crystal, how are you, sir?
Hello, gentles. Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. It's lovely to see you both.
It's lovely to see you and to hear your beautiful. You have a beautiful instrument, Ben, if I may say so.
The
I don't know.
here, or
No, I meant your voice. I mean, you
you.
start reciting Shakespeare, particularly in original pronunciation. I swear to God, I start to ovulate. I don't know how that works, but it's so lovely. And not only do you act and you teach and you direct, and you also literally wrote the book on Shakespeare, more than one. Shakespeare Words, the definitive current glossary of language companion, introduction by Sir Stanley Wells, A Knight of the Realm, which you wrote with your dad, and it's a
doorstop. It's an incredible.
It is a doorstop.
I have a well-thumbed copy. I think all of us do somewhere or other. Yep.
It was right at I just left drama school, and I was going back up to university to work with a friend's production of Much Ado, and I was looking through Onions, the glossary that everyone was using, and it didn't have the words in it I wanted because it was written in 1910, and Victorians didn't want to reference anybody, and they all knew Latin. So I phoned up Dad and said, "Help me with these words." And he said, "Well, don't you have onions with you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "They're not in there." And he said, "Well, someone should write a new one." And we both thought about it over the weekend, and then came up with the idea, pitched it to Penguin, and that was my birth into the profession in some ways out of drama school. 3 years working on the glossary.
And you come to your profession honestly. Your father does this work as well, yeah?
Well, Dad, so when I did my very, very first bit of Shakespeare acting when I was 17, I played Ariel in The Tempest, and Dad was playing Gonzalo? The old Polonius sort of advisor figure, and my mom was playing Miranda, and they've both been acting since they were kids, I suppose, but amateurly, and but a love of words certainly is a shared profession in the house, that's for sure. Ping pong punning at tea time, the works. It's miserable.
And how would you describe what you do with
When you have to fill in a
form?
When you have to fill in a form, it says profession.
Yeah. They stop you at the border and they say, "You."
Well, when it involves insurance, I don't put actor. That's for sure. Because I remember hearing the story that they immediately assume you're sort of Harrison Ford driving some fast car, and then you're completely uninsurable. So, an adventurer in Shakespeare production and practice, usually strumming and thrumming the strings of how they used to do it 400 years ago, partly out of some unrequited geek desire to travel back there and be there in that beautiful round open air space that is said to have had the atmosphere of a football match, where people were jostling and calling out and not being respectful in that modern 20th, 21st century audience, quiet sitting, but actually it was a two-way symbiotic relationship, a visceral, entirely engaging dynamic. And what little we understand about how they used to do it, I like to use a little imaginative sugar and explore today as a way to perhaps shine a light to what might be a future of keeping Shakespeare alive and resonant with the future bardaholics, I guess.
Cool.
Gary,
and you fit all that in the box when they say profession. That's
they do allow really big boxes now. Like, it's awesome. They're often good, like Word docs or whatever, and you can just keep going.
Thank you for not giving us the reduced answer. That was good. Well, and this, you are arguably most famous for your work with original pronunciation, and you know, satisfying that geek nerd itch to find out what it was like. There's textual evidence for this, right? You're not just making this completely up.
No, absolutely. And much that I'd like to take credit for it, it's entirely, well, the background research and academic work is my dad's, the linguist David Crystal. And he was invited by the Globe in about 2004. They had explored original practice space, of course, by building that theater, costume, music, fight. And they hadn't dared do accent yet because they feared that people wouldn't understand it. So apparently the deal was clinched when someone said to them, the director, Tim Carroll, who was pitching it, said, you know, if we don't do this, Stratford-upon-Avon are gonna. And you've never seen a project greenlit faster. So they pulled that in, and he's well practiced at looking at how accents used to be, even if they've long gone. And there are, you know, a number of ways you can find out. The rhymes being one of them, the spellings being another, and puns as well, that helps, and accounts of the time. And using those 3 or 4 sources of data, he gets the sound about 80 to 90% right. And then I wasn't really so interested in it to begin with. And if anything, I was a little envious that Dad had got to the Globe before me. But I made up for it a year later. I got on the stage for a season the following year. And of course, I wasn't envious at all. I was hugely proud of him. But still, the sound was interesting. But as far as I was concerned, I was of the generation that's, in fact, this is still said today, that my accent, my natural speaking accent, isn't right for Shakespeare, that I had to learn received pronunciation, the accent of the BBC English, you know, the sort of Laurence Olivier sort of sound to do Shakespeare. And I would practice my Shakespeare audition speeches in a park near where I lived in the Welsh accent that I grew up speaking, which is a bit more like that. And then I'd go to the audition and sort of do it like that, you know. And then this story came from the rehearsals at the Globe. Glyn MacDonald, the master of movement there, sat in as the Romeo and Juliet company were transitioning from their received pronunciation rehearsals into their original pronunciation rehearsals. And she gripped my dad's arm and said, my goodness, they're moving differently. And that's what got me, because I'd spent much of my younger life watching Shakespeare, watching people stand very still, declaiming Shakespeare and not moving well. And then I got to see Theatre de Complicité perform. And I was like, my goodness, these people know how to move. They're okay with voice, but what would happen if you could fuse the two? What if there was some magical bridge between the body and the voice that activated the whole thing and allowed the circuit to light up? And I think that original pronunciation has a number of wonderful mechanisms in it that flick a lot of those lights on. But the bridge for me isn't to a place where we're only doing Shakespeare in this recreation of a 400-year-old sound. The bridge to me is that original pronunciation redresses the balance and stops people thinking that there should be one sound to listen to Shakespeare in, received pronunciation, and that the sound to hear Shakespeare in is your sound because you want to speak it. So I'm hoping that this work that Dad started and that I kicked around for a few years has sort of balanced out people's ears, and now people are thinking, yeah, Shakespeare's good as long as it's spoken from the heart. It doesn't matter what the accent is.
I mean, I remember seeing Northern Broadsides doing Shakespeare years back and going, wow, that resonates. You know, Barry Rutter's a lot, and just the way that would sort of bounce off the stage at you like that. And then seeing some touring American companies over here doing it and hearing American voices saying it. And I love hearing that. I think it works really well. I know some of the sort of the Shakespeare snobs go, oh, this sounds terrible. I go, no, this, oh, Shakespeare, that's 100 years old tops. You know, it's like, it's ridiculous thinking of it like that. And I hate that. It just always sounds so much better when it's said in a voice that you believe.
Well,
oh, sorry, Austin, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I literally this week posted a podcast about how the speaking Shakespeare has been taught in the last, say, 100 years, 100, maybe 30, 40 years. And it's about control. This speech is about controlling and arguably colonization. You know, Shakespeare is the greatest English language playwright, and he must be spoken in a certain way, which is nonsense. It's intended to exclude people. And the kind of work that you're doing, Ben, and you're describing, Gary, I think is shows that Shakespeare is meant to be inclusive and open to everybody. And what you said, as long as he's spoken from the heart, you know, he frequently makes more sense when he's spoken from the heart as opposed to how he's supposed to be spoken.
Well, you were talking about the rhymes, and I know that having seen some of your work, I understand that's exactly how we work out the original pronunciation. Some of the rhymes that we make jokes about when you're doing it in RP, you know, through the forest I have gone, but a thing and found I none. What gone? What the, you know, and all that sort of thing. And you make jokes of it. And I've seen actors make the joke, you know, and it's funny. It is funny when the rhyme doesn't work and you make the joke. But obviously that sort of thing suddenly makes sense. Rhymes suddenly work that didn't work before. When you Northern Broadsides, rhymes worked. You know, there's that. I remember seeing also a production, I think it was the English Shakespeare Company, and they regionalised all the accents of the characters in the history plays deliberately, you know, and having a Geordie Hotspur saying, that ruin shall be my throne. And I love those sort of lines singing off the page like that, you know.
Well, you know, you said it yourself, the RP accent's only been around late 1800s, really,
Yeah.
so 130, 40 years or so.
Yeah.
2% of the population in the UK naturally speak it, and yet somehow this sound has appropriated this artwork. And I mean, you know, as long... I was working with a company in the States, and the guy playing, they were working on Dream actually, and the guy was playing Oberon, and he said, the thing is, I've got this speech, flower of this purple dye hit with Cupid's archery, sink an apple of his eye, and it doesn't rhyme. And I said, well, it does in OP. Flower of this purple dye hit with Cupid's archery, sink an apple of his eye. And he said, yeah, Ben, but I'm not doing this we're not doing this in OP. And I said, well, then pick an accent that it does work in. Just pick an accent that it rhymes in. It could be Southern, flower, this purple dye, here with Cupid's archery, sinking apple of his eye, you know, whatever works. But why we've been squeezing this artwork into a sound that just doesn't work, to the point that a bit like throwing a toilet joke onto Shakespeare because the words are difficult and we can't make the jokes that he wrote funny, making a joke out of the ridiculous situation that the rhyme doesn't work because we've decided we have to speak it in a sound it wasn't written for. I mean, it's subservience to an altar of Shakespeare that I'm dead against, that I found myself excluded from, and say, yeah, I suppose if I were to try to narrow down what I'm doing, what I've been trying to do is open up a few bridges to not grant more ownership, but to hopefully let people see that Shakespeare is there for the owning and for the taking. And the problem is that there have been guardians keeping it and doling it out like it's some special sauce that only a few.
Well, and I love how you say that the OP accent changes how you move. It changes how you hold yourself. It changes how you carry yourself. And I think you told me when I interviewed you for my podcast that it also speeds things up. People talk a lot faster in OP.
It's we don't have an awful lot of evidence towards the melody, the prosody, the music of the sound, but we've got speak the speech of prayer, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue, and do not mouth it. And we've got all the elisions in the first folio too, you know, like we still use one today, oth clock, O apostrophe TH apostrophe, where some sounds, some syllables have been removed. Now, some of those times it's for the meter, but in the prose, well, there's no reason to elide syllables metrically there because there is no sort of meter there. The indication is that it's to replicate the rapidity of speech. And I think that the main sound in OP is a shift from the I, the first person pronoun I, in my natural voice here, and I in received pronunciation becomes I, and the center, the sound emanates somewhere from my gut. It pushes you into more of a lower center of gravity. Your feet move to more of a fighting stance than a declamatory stance. Add to that this rapidity, and you've suddenly got people sort of barreling around the stage very fast, speaking very fast with each other. And it seems to light a fire under the emotional chamber it seems to light a fire in the heart. And what we found with the original pronunciation explorations is that not only do people, the audience, say, I've never understood Shakespeare so clearly before, but they seem to be more emotionally gripped too. And I think it's to do with that old adage of we think poetry makes more sense when we slow it down, but actually it may make less logical sense, but it grips the heart and tears you down the ride much better when you're going at pace.
It's literally more visceral. It's coming from your viscera, not your head. Not your
Beautiful.
head.
Beautiful.
I love it.
Yeah. Me too. I mean, and yet, you know, like I say, it's been fascinating to explore it. But like all original practices, I think it's a means to an end. To avoid it becoming a museum, to avoid it becoming a dead end, the sound has opened up all sorts of possibilities of puns and gags and reactivating the rhymes and that. And perhaps the end is that people will no longer balk as they used to do when they hear the Northern Broadsides, or they hear someone from Texas, or they hear someone from Wales, or from Liverpool, as someone wrote to me the other day saying that they'd worked with an actor from Liverpool that told they had to lose their accent. So hopefully it's gonna open things up for people rather than close things down.
Well, and it's interesting too, because we just did, I would just performed in As You Like It with the Show Must Go Online, and which has the famous speech, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. And that speech, as famous as it is, doesn't have a lot of definite articles, which makes
right?
It has one, which makes me think that character comes from a place in England where they don't use the definite article so much. It's like Yorkshire or something, right? Am I right? But I've never heard it done with that accent that explains the lack of definite articles.
That's interesting. I used to work with a great actor called Emma Pallant, who spent a lot of time at the Globe, and she played Jakes for the Globe a few years ago, and she decided that the specificity in that one meant that particular character in that story was the engine behind the melancholy. It was a lovely choice, beautiful choice.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, and I was going to ask, do you can you reach into your bag of tricks and give us a character's speech in OP, so we have a sense of what you're talking about in full?
Sure. Yeah.
Let me know what speech it's going to be before you start it, so I can prep my brain to draw while you speak. How about that?
Well, how about because I've never swung at the speech or the character before, seeing as it was around me a lot when I played Ariel. How about a bit of Caliban?
Oh, okay. Yep, I'm off.
Be not afeard, the oil is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and heart not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometime voices that, if I then had waked after long sleep, will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again.
I've got goosebumps.
That's such a beautiful speech. And
I'm gonna swing through it once more, because I did, and I knew I was going to do it. I did exactly what I said I was going to do, what I said not to do, which is slow it down. Here it is at a more OP speed, okay?
I was going to ask about that. Go ahead, yeah.
Be not afeard, the oil is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and heart not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometimes voices that, if I then had waked after long sleep, will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming, the clouds methought would open, show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again.
Wow.
Yeah. It's beautiful, fast, and slow.
I
Well,
mean,
and what I love about pace is that, like, I remember watching Ian McKellen on Speaking Shakespeare, John Barton's thing. Not Speaking Shakespeare, it's called something else.
Playing Shakespeare.
Playing Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So remember, Ian McKellen in John Barton's Playing Shakespeare talks for 20 minutes about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And it is so articulate and so wise about what that speech is doing and what it means. And then he demonstrates it. And my biggest takeaway is, oh, so just go slow. That's all I can see that he's doing. And slow Shakespeare has its place for sure, because it gives impact. Yeah. But if it's all slow, then everything's same. Just as everything is all fast. It
disintegrates, absolutely. I was asked to do To Be or Not to Be a while ago in OP. And I looked around to see what the competition was like, and it's lovely, but there's lots out there of To Be or Not to Be.
I'm already heading for the exit at that point.
Is the question, and you're like, it's so beautifully thought through. Every single syllable is completely boom there. But it misses the interrogation quality that OP shed light on for me, of to be or not to be. That is the question, whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them to die, and so on and so forth, right? Where you've got this lovely quality of fast and slow, like you say, that is a character live thinking before you.
Yeah. I loved it so much in yesterday's Show Must Go Online's 12th night, where Michael Perez did his Orsino, and it was wonderfully active and alive and not reflective and melancholy and making me want to shoot myself and then him.
Yeah. I mean, I always do whenever I work with when I'm working with actors stuff, and most of the directing I do is with amateur companies or community type stuff. But I always say to them, just, when in doubt, go fast. And then you earn the slow bits, crack along, and then when you slow down, people will listen. It's like, and don't go slow for the sake of it, or they'll drift off. But if you're going bloody, 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 blah, blah, boom, blah, 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 they'll listen to that bit. It's just do it, for God's sake.
My old drama school teacher said it to me, and I've been saying this ever since. In our work, you pay into the bank. Everyone pays into the bank with speed, which allows one person to take out of the bank with a pause. And if everyone's taken out of the bank and we go into debt, then the audience will basically hang us in debtor's prison. And I thought that's really lovely. Everyone pays into the bank together and allows one person to take out every now and again.
Well, and we find the same thing in the Reduced Shakespeare Company with laughs. Not all laughs are equal, Not all, well, clearly not all jokes are equal, but it's, we get people who want to do our shows and then I got to throw a joke in on every word. No, relax. No. Don't squirt it away with a bunch of little jokes. We're building to this one big moment, I love the idea that original pronunciation can lead to a freedom of people thinking, it's not OP, it's MP, my pronunciation. It's our pronunciation. It's the way we speak it. Yeah, the words mean what they mean, but it gives a flexibility and an immediacy to the language. And Shakespeare was a guy who played with language, famously.
100%. Yeah. I mean, my father teaches me that accent is identity, essentially. That it's your accent speaks, as it were, more volumes to where you've been in your life, what's happened to you, the places you've lived, the people you've met, than the clothes that you wear, your fingerprints, or the things that you like or retweet. And the working with actors who have genuinely never spoken Shakespeare in their natural regional accent before, and the ownership and embracement of the text, often the times of text that they've known backwards, but have never sort of held close to their actual identity heart, and they just explode into fireworks of emotion. It's beautiful to watch, and you sort of think, why has someone prohibited you from doing this before now? It's madness.
Do you work with non-English speakers?
Yeah, I've been really, really lucky. As I'm sure you've experienced, Shakespeare is everywhere, and I've been really blessed to travel the world. I've worked with actors in all over Europe, Russia, India, the Americas, New Zealand. I've worked with some Maori actors and worked with a sort of a Maori original pronunciation sound, and yeah, I've been really lucky to work with a whole vast network of different sounds and ethnicities and people.
Do you know Peter Holland?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he has been a mentor to us since we met on a chat show, Notes and Queries with Clive Anderson back in the 90s.
Oh, wow, no way.
Yeah, and we did Rap Othello, and Peter was brought on and he said, look, I know I've been brought here to be the responsible opposing viewpoint, but I love that. And we've been mates since. And he told me once, the beauty of Shakespeare is not that it's not that everywhere he's the same. It's that everywhere he's different. He means something. He has different value. This same guy and this same body of work has so many different meanings to so many different people around the world, and that's what makes him so sort of cool.
Yeah, the Globe did an exhibition a few years ago called Shakespeare is German, because the Germans believe that Shakespeare is theirs. They have such great ownership over it. And I remember the actor John Canny from
South Africa
would say that when he approached Othello, he needed to translate Shakespeare into Xhosa, into his one of his languages, and retranslate it back to take. That's a different story, really, actually, because he was taking ownership over Othello in a different way, I suppose. But I suppose the territory that this artist inspires over folk is quite a remarkable thing. That you, like you say, you can go anywhere and someone will say, no, you can't do that to Shakespeare. I know this work. It is ours. It is my country's.
You just have to look at the Star Trek film and they say, you've never heard Hamlet unless you've heard it in the original Klingon.
Well, and I liken I liken Shakespeare to a musical instrument, and not everybody plays an instrument the same way. It's an instrument that I want to master and get better at, and by getting better at it, I need to practice it, but also let it into me so I can bring it out in music. And I think that's wonderfully true in your example as well.
Did your Reduced Shakespeare Company work come from a love of Shakespeare, or was it the other way around?
It came from a love of theater, and Shakespeare being kind of obviously synonymous, but kind of so much of theater comes from Shakespeare, I think. So it kind of went that way. It started with theater and then Shakespeare, and then you begin to realize that Shakespeare is at the root of everything that we do. And just over the years, in my desire to get better at him, I mean, I think one of the things Reduced Shakespeare Company does is that we always like to sort of surprise the audience and make them think, oh, wait, these idiots could do this for real if they wanted.
Right.
And we have done it for real, and we do it, and they don't understand that we are doing it for real, even when we're doing it ridiculously.
Yeah.
And so in that desire to get better at it, I've just sort of gone down this deep dive into articles and books and plays and whatever this thing is, Gary, web series.
Yeah, web series. I think we've landed on web series now, haven't we? I think that's what we're calling it. Yeah,
web series. Yeah, and conversations with artists such as yourself. Talking about just learning more in every conversation.
What was your entry point, Gary?
I had that classic route of most British school children of having it sort of rammed into my face by a teacher who perhaps wasn't particularly good at it, taking us to see a really shit production of something and going, oh, this is awful. And then in my mid-20s, very late, I was thumbing through Time Out on the What's On or whatever, and I saw that Jonathan Pryce was going to be playing Macbeth at the Royal Shakespeare Company with Sinead Cusack and Hugh Quashie, and I was a big fan of Highlander, so Hugh Quashie's in it, brilliant. And I love Jonathan Pryce, and I thought, oh, that'd be fun, and I did Macbeth, and that was kind of all right because it was a bit of fighting, and so I went to see that. I thought, I'll go and see that, and the lights went down and the play started, and I went. And as soon as it finished, I went back to the box office and bought tickets to see it again. And then I took a membership and went to see everything the Royal Shakespeare Company did for about the next 15, 20 years, I think, practically. And just like fell in love overnight because suddenly someone showed me how to do it properly. And that was mine. That was my way in. And from then on, I couldn't get enough of it, and every time I get a chance to sort of do it in any way possible, I do.
And you say that's a typically English way of learning, being introduced to Shakespeare. And I think that's one of the reasons the RSC, my RSC, has been as successful as it is because I think that is also common to every culture and language.
Yeah, I think it is that thing of, it's a worthy thing you have to be taught. And it's like, no, it's a play. It should be seen and heard, not I mean, yes, there's a place to read and study, but God, get it on its feet and do it. And it comes to life so much more once you start saying the damn stuff,
I think it was Teller when he did this Macbeth in DC. At least that's one of the first times I came across it, and I've been using it ever since. He said, if you wanted to introduce a youngling to Mozart, you wouldn't plop down the musical score in front of them. You take them to a concert, you can play them the CD. If you wanted to introduce someone to the fineries of cooking, you don't give them a recipe book, you cook for them, or you take them to a great restaurant and introduce them to a Michelin-starred chef or whatever. Why we introduce our younglings sitting down in a book on a page rather than teaching them how they might learn it by heart and speak them as if the words are theirs on fire. Why we don't encourage, a lot of the Scandinavian schools do this a bit more, but why we don't encourage a place to play with Shakespeare that would so more easily ready everyone to want to be able to analyze these works in a literary critical sense afterwards.
It's fascinating. Obviously my children have been brought up with it, and they've been taken to it from, before they could speak or walk, the open air ones that I've been involved with every summer, and they've been there playing while they've been sitting in rehearsals. My daughter at 5 at the taming of the shoe rehearsals coming out saying, my tongue in your tail should buzz, and all this sort of thing. And I'm going, whoops. And when my son was about 6, correcting my daughter for misquoting The Tempest at the dinner table, and so they've been looking at it for 8. I mean, someone said to my daughter when she was about 10, what Shakespeare have you seen? So I've seen The Dream 4 times, I've seen Hamlet, and she went through this list, and they're like, and then she was just gone to secondary school recently, and I was talking to her English teacher, and she said, it's the first time ever when I've said to a class of children, I went doing Shakespeare next term, one of them at the back has gone, yes. And I was like, and my work here is done. If I've got no other achievement as a parent, that one will do me nicely. Thank you very much.
I'm going to buy the finest mic I can. And then
poof. Done.
Well, and I'm going to steal that incredible wisdom from Teller, and what are the odds that this great intelligent wisdom comes from the silent half?
That's brilliant.
He talking of Macca's, that production, the reason why he resonated with it, he wanted to make all the moments of magic, and I didn't see it. I've got a DVD of it and I've seen clips of it, but the witches appear, they disappear, the dagger floats, and it all happened on stage in a beautifully sort of illusory way. And what a
it was online at the beginning of the quarantine.
Yes, I think I saw some of it. Yeah, I think I did. I think that is the one I saw some of. Yeah.
There's a couple of guys that did a dictionary of stage directions of all the extant Elizabethan plays, and that's all well and good, but at the back, all of the stage directions are relisted by titles. So there's costume and props and everything else, but there's special effects, and the special effects list is really, really cool because you can
smell a device.
Exactly. You can get a sense of of what they had at their fingertips, as it were, what they could make happen, but B, you sort of think, whose job was that? Who was the master the master of magic, essentially, the master of making that banquet table in The Tempest disappear?
Yeah. Who was the real life Prospero?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Well, and that's one of the arguments that, you know, Prospero is actually Shakespeare when he says goodbye to the theater and blah, 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 which is probably nonsense. But what I love about it is that Shakespeare himself was a magician. You know, he thought of this. He created this stuff. You know, he made people come and go. He begged the audience's forgiveness. You know, he said goodbye. I think getting back, he wrote so theatrically and so aware, and I do think that is a thing that a lot of productions miss, is Shakespeare's theatricality. They try to make it, I don't know, realistic or epic or some way it's supposed to be, when in fact it was a bunch of scrappy players with little rehearsal trying to embody and articulate great text, knowing that they're not only talking to, but sometimes over their audience.
Yeah. I'm you know, I'm sure you guys are asked as well, what's your favorite? And I usually say Lear, partly because I hated it in school and then acted in it and had a transcendental moment with it, and now I have a line of it tattooed on my arm. And I think it's, in terms of what constitutes a really great play, you know, great plot, mirrored subplot, brilliant characters, poetry, prose, song, great fight at the end, you know, it's got it all. But it's also epic, and it's also realistic, and it's also theatrical. And he does have that amazing ability to be theatrical and be epic and be down to earth realistic. It's almost like his magic wand wasn't a wand, but a magnifying glass that just goes past the skin. And like he wandered around the world seeing our ridiculous, wonderful humanity for what it is and was, and somehow poured it through a quill. It's really quite impressive.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on and drawing on Shakespeare with us, and just keep drawing, Ben, because you inspire so many of us.
Yeah.
Well, so do you guys both. So thanks for including me in this, and look forward to seeing you in real life one day.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Can you sort of sign us out with something in original pronunciation? Do you think, is there something a bit sort of goodbye-ish that comes to mind?
Yeah, sure. Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as if I told you, while spirits and are melted into air, into thin air.
Ben, what does it feel like to have peaked so young?
Do you know how many of my exes have asked me that?